Okay, so we're going to do our study on the book of Ruth. There's a tie-in between Judges and Ruth. It's why I decided to do them both together. Not only that, but we need to go through quite a few books ahead of us. But the story of Ruth is during the time of the Judges. So during this 400-year time period that we're talking about, 350 to 400-year time period that we're talking about, this story of Ruth is tucked in there, showing us that while many had fallen into idolatry, God always keeps a remnant, a faithful remnant to himself that continue to work. And we're going to get into, that continue to obey his commandments. And we're going to get into that in a little bit. Ruth. Ruth, the word means friend or companion. The time period of this book is during the time of the Judges of Israel. Where is it? Well, at the beginning of it's only 4 chapters long. In the beginning of chapter 1, they're in the land of Moab. And it's going to end in the land of Israel. If you pull the very last page, yours is black and white, I think. I'm not sure I got color for everybody because I ran out of ink. You're going to see a map there. Up at the top is how it would have looked at the time of the Judges. If you look up at the time or the time of the book of Ruth, and you'll see it's the kingdom of Judah, the kingdom of Edom, and all of that. Now, what I did was we're not as familiar with this type of a map because it doesn't look familiar to us. But if you go down to a more familiar map at the bottom, that's Israel, more like what we're familiar with today. At the bottom section, I took this little purple part in my map here, this little Moab, the land of Moab, and I just put it down there so that you could see in today's land. It's over in the Jordan area. And so you can see this is where the land of Moab would have been. And the reason for that is I wanted to show you the proximity. It is reasonably close. Now you can be in Israel and you can look over and you see Jordan. You can be in Israel and you look over and you see Syria. You can be in Israel and you look over and you see Lebanon. And then if you travel all the way down, you can look over and you can see into the area of Egypt. But those 3 up there, the ones that I talked about, Lebanon, Syria, and Jordan, you can do that in one day. You could see all of those spots in one day if you traveled around. And so you're not talking about a huge proximity of distance, is kind of what I was trying to show you with that. All right, who was Ruth? Well, Ruth was a Moabite woman from the land of Moab. When Naomi and her husband, Elimelech, left the land of Israel during one of the times of famine, they took their 2 sons with them. Now, when God sent when there was those times of discipline would come to the people in Israel because they were misbehaving, one of the things that happened often was famine. That would happen in the land. And so this is what happens with Naomi and her husband and why they had to leave. And then they traveled over to Moab to try and get food for them and their 2 sons. Well, while they are in Moab, both of the sons are going to marry Moabite women. Tragedy is going to strike as both Elimelech and his sons Mahlon, who is going to be the husband of Ruth, and Chilion, who is the husband of Orpah, are killed. This is going to leave Naomi and her 2 Moabite daughter-in-laws defenseless and unprotected. This was not a good thing for women in this time period. And as far as we know, neither of these women had any children. Scripture doesn't show us that they had any children at all. So they're over there in Moab trying to eke out a living. They marry over there. We don't know what happened to the 3 men. We're not sure. But we know that all the 2 sons and the father are killed while they're there, and so that leaves only the women. Naomi was from the town of Bethlehem, which ironically means house of bread. So she left the house of bread to go because of famine. Isn't that amazing? And went and tried to find bread in a foreign land. It was famine that caused her family to flee as they searched for a way to feed themselves. So newly widowed, and now with both of her sons dead, Naomi decides that she will return to the only place she knows, her hometown of Bethlehem. The 2 young wives of her sons, who are Ruth and Orpah, remember they're Moabite women, would likely stay in their home territory of Moab and probably remarry. Of course, they would want children and husbands and a home of their own, so that seems reasonable that they would stay. So Naomi packs her few possessions and she bids her daughter-in-laws goodbye. Orpah leaves in tears to return to her home, but Ruth refuses to leave her mother-in-law's side. No amount of coaxing would convince her to stay in Moab. And then Ruth is going to speak some of the most beautiful words that are spoken in the Bible. This is the NIV version of this, which is not the one I'm as familiar with. But it's, "Do not urge me to leave you or to return from following you. For where you go, I will go, and where you lodge, I will lodge. Your people shall be my people, and your God shall be my God."
These were our wedding vows.
Yes, and so I was just going to say, do we not often hear this at weddings? Between a husband and a wife. But originally, this is a mother-in-law and a daughter-in-law. Can you imagine speaking these words to your mother-in-law? But it shows you the closeness of what that was, and that these words spoken from a mother-in-law, from a daughter-in-law to a mother-in-law, are some of the most beautiful words in the Bible and are now used as wedding vows, like you said. I think that's so rich. Well, Ruth and Naomi then are going to return to Bethlehem. And what happens next? Well, while they are in Bethlehem, Ruth quickly begins to look for ways to earn food for Naomi and herself. She begins to work the fields and harvest grain for bread. She catches the eye of a wealthy landowner who notices her ethics for hard work. He makes it a little easier for her to gather more grain than she would on her own, and his attentions do not go unnoticed by Naomi. His name is Boaz. That's a coffee pot. And he is a distant relative of Naomi. A positive development for the ladies. Naomi begins to coach Ruth on ways to show Boaz that she is interested. Boaz appears to be an older man, not married, with a good reputation in the community. Ruth will follow the advice of Naomi as far as the attentions with Boaz. Now, how does that work? Well, what is a kinsman redeemer? That's the role that we are going to see Boaz step into. Let's talk about that a little bit. According to the laws in Leviticus 25 and 27, God made provision for many items that would need to be redeemed. A sacrificial animal, a house, a field, even a firstborn son. We are also told that a poor relative may be redeemed by someone who is related to that person. In the story of Ruth and Boaz, Boaz is going to agree to actually redeem Naomi, but through Ruth. That's right, to redeem Naomi, who is his relative, but he's going to do it through Ruth because she's the provider of Naomi. Naomi is his close relative, but Ruth is the one who goes to him and offers herself in marriage. As she humbles herself to Boaz, seeking his protection, the heart of Boaz is moved. Through some ancient rituals and customs that we don't have time to go through today, a legal binding contract to redeem the land of Naomi's late husband that can be redeemed, and Ruth will become part of that contract. Now, Ruth and Boaz will then marry with the blessing of the village and with the blessing of Naomi, and they're going to go on and they're going to have a son, and his name is going to be Obed. He will be the father of Jesse, and Jesse is the father of King David. And so you can see here we have another Moabite woman brought in by her faith in the one true God. Your God shall be my God. In her pledge, she comes into the nation of Israel under the one true knowledge of under the knowledge of the one true God of Israel, and the blessings are provided for her. In fact, God uses her in the lineage of King David, and then later on in the son of David, in the lineage of Jesus Christ. She is one of the other women who's mentioned in that lineage of grace. Outside of the nation of Israel, brought in through her faith in God. The main point, well, Ruth is a story of great love. It is a story of love between Ruth and Naomi. It is a story of love between Ruth and Boaz. But we should not miss some of the more hidden aspects of the book. During this time in Israel's history, there was great evil, sin, and disobedience that was happening. But pockets of the Jewish people remained faithful to the Lord and his covenant to them. Boaz is a beautiful example of that. He agrees to become a kinsman redeemer who pays a price to take away shame and poverty on the two women and replaced it with pride and blessing in their lives. Ruth goes from being a barren woman whose heritage was filled with idol worship, destitute, and homeless, to a woman filled with the joy of marriage and motherhood, comfort, and the knowledge of the one true God of Israel. It's also our story, as we are hopeless and helpless, but are redeemed with a purchase price by a near relative. We are spoken for by the one who sees us as a priceless treasure. We are loved and blessed by the one who desires our soul to be knit with his heart. Boaz paints a beautiful picture of what we are able to receive through Jesus Christ, who becomes our kinsman redeemer. All right, it's a beautiful story. It's only 4 chapters.